Good day everyone. So this is now the continuation of what we had yesterday. This is part 2 of lesson 2C, solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Now yesterday I have already told you how to solve equations, quadratic equations using completing the square, though the process is quite complicated, or there are a lot of steps that you have to go through, but remember that completing the square has no restrictions at all. So in other words, any quadratic equations can be solved by completing the square. Alright, so this time, since we're done with the process of completing the square, we're going to do some solving problems here. Alright, so first problem is that Karen wants to use completing the square in solving the quadratic equation 4x squared minus 25 equals 0. Question: can she use it in finding the solutions of the equation? Explain why or why not. So earlier, I've told you that there's no restrictions as to the use of completing the square. Therefore, Karen could use completing the square here. Now, how do we solve this using completing the square? Alright, so here we go. Let's go back to the process. So the given was 4x squared minus 25 equals 0. Now the first step of solving this by completing the square is to make a equal to 1, or divide both sides of the equation by a. So as we do that, of course, we're going to have 4 divided by 4 is 1. So we have x squared, and then 25 divided by 4, of course that will not give us a whole number, so we have to retain it as it is. So we're going to have here x squared minus 25 over 4. Alright, so the next step to this, since our a is already 1, next step is to transpose the constant c to the other side of the equation. So this negative 25 over 4 here shall be transposed to the other side of the equation. So therefore, we have x squared equals 25 over 4. Next step to this is to add b squared, b over 2 squared to make a perfect square trinomial. However, since we have here on this side only x squared, and we do not have b, or the value of b here is 0, therefore we are going to skip this step instead. Alright, so skipping the step and then going to the next step, and the next step is express the perfect square trinomial as a square binomial. Remember that we did skip the making of perfect square trinomial, or the adding of b over 2 squared, right? So therefore, we cannot have here the expressing perfect square trinomial as a square of a binomial. In the first place, we do not have a perfect square trinomial here, right? Okay, so this step is also skipped. Let's proceed with solve the equation by extracting square roots. And you know that in solving this one here, using completing the square, all we need to do is to put in x, and then to change this exponent over here into plus and minus. Oops, I forgot to put the equal sign. So we have plus, it's messy over here. Okay, so let's just erase this one first. Okay, erase that and that one. Okay, so x squared, x squared will become x, and then the exponent 2 shall become the positive and negative square root sign. And then we're going to put in the 25 over 4 inside the square root sign. Okay, so the equation will become this way. Alright, now since we have here the square root of 25 over 4, let's get the square root of these two numbers. So the square root of 25 is 5 and the square root of 4 is 2. So that would mean that the x values that we have is 5 over 2, the positive and negative 5 over 2. Okay? Now, what about this? Alright, so if you are to choose between completing the square and factoring and finding the solutions of 4x squared minus 20x equals 11, which one would you choose? Explain and solve the equations using your preferred method. Okay, so this question is actually opinion-based. So when I say opinion-based, so it's up to the person who is actually solving. Okay, so if, for example, you are equipped with factoring, you practice or you mastered your skills in factoring, then of course you are going to choose factoring here. However, there are some who are also would like to choose completing the square. So as I've said, it really depends on the person who is solving. Now, what I'm going to show here are the two ways of solving this equation. So we have factoring and completing the square, and I would like to start with factoring. Okay, so the given was 4x squared minus 20x equals 11. Remember that in factoring, the first step is always to set your quadratic equation in standard form. Therefore, you have to transpose this 11 here to the other side to make it standard. Okay, so of course, because you'll be using the magic rule here, because it will cross the equal sign, of course 11 will become negative. So there you go, you're going to get 4x squared minus 20x minus 11 equals 0. Now remember that in factoring, you need to start with two sets of parentheses. Alright, and here you're going to do some trial and error. Alright, so if you do some trial and error, you need to start with your first term, factors of your first term. And there are two factors of 4. You have 4 and 1, and two sets of factors. So you have 4 and 1, you have 2 and 2. Now, I'd like to choose 2 and 2 first. Okay? So 2 and 2. And then remember that the sign that I have for the last term is negative. So there must be two unlike signs. So we're going to have 2x plus and minus. Okay, so now 11 has only two factors, 11 and 1. And then you have here negative for the middle term. So I'm going to put in here the 11 and then 1. Let us just try if this is correct. Okay, so how do we check whether these factors are correct? Of course, we need to multiply our inner terms. We have 1 times 2x is 2x. Okay, excuse my writings again. So, and then multiply 2x, the outer terms, with negative 11. So that's negative 22. Okay. Oh my god. Okay, so you have 2x and negative 22x. When you add them, it will give you 22 minus 2 is 20, negative 20x, which is actually our middle term. And there you go. I think you now have the correct factors. Okay, so it must be 2x plus 1 and 2x minus 11. Okay, so you're done with factoring this quadratic here. Okay, so the final factors would be 2x plus 1 and 2x minus 11. Now, the next step is to separate each of these factors into, or equate each of these factors into 0. So, each. So, that must be 2x plus 1 equals 0 and 2x minus 11 equals 0. Now, after which, you do the part of solving linear equations like transposing 1 to the other side, so making it negative 1. So you're going to have negative 1. Okay? And since you have 2 here, so you have to divide both by 2. So you now have 2 over 2x over 2, and then remember that you can cancel this out. So what remains is x equals negative 1/2, our first value for x. Okay, let's do the same thing here. So transposing negative 11 to the other side of the equation will give us positive 11. And then same, we need to divide both by 2. So that will give us 11 over 2. Cancel this. So we have x equals 11 over 2. Okay, you can pause this video, write down the values so that we can compare whether if we're going to use completing the square, we will still come up with negative 1/2 and 11 over 2. Alright? Now, let's proceed with the process of completing the square in solving this. So, after this, since I have showed you how to use factoring and then completing the square, so you will be the one who will decide as to which one would you want to choose. Alright, so by completing the square, the first step is to divide both sides of the equation and by a. So this means that we're going to divide all by 4 because a here is 4. Now 4 divided by 4 is 1, and then negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. So the final answer here is x squared minus 5x equals 11 over 4. Now the next step is to transpose the constant to the other side. But by the way, take note that the constant is already on the right side of the equation. So we're done with the step. Okay, so we're done with that. And then let's proceed with the next step, which is to add both sides of the equation by b. Since our b here is 5, so that must be 5. Okay. Excuse my writing. So that must be 5 over 2. Wow. Okay. Okay. 5 over 2. Okay na yan. Okay, squared. Okay, and what is 5 over 2? 5 times 5 is 25. 2 times 2 is 4. So that must be 25 over 2. Remember that it should be both sides of the equation. So therefore, we're going to have here the 25 over 4 and the 25 over 4. Now, before proceeding to the next step, of course, you need to combine first this one, 11 over 4, and 25 over 4. And this will not be difficult for you because you already have a same denominators here. So, all you need is just to add numerators. Okay, so 11 plus 25 is actually 36. Therefore, you have x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 and then 36 over 4. Now, this 36 over 4 can be divided by, can be equal to 9, I mean. However, since we have here a fraction, so just retain it as it is, alright? So, you'll know later why you should not divide 36 by 4, though you can do that, okay? You can do that, that's for sure. That's emphasize that you can divide 36 by 4 is equal to 9, right? But for this purpose, I will not be dividing them. Alright, so next step is to express the other side, the left side of the equation, as a square of binomial. I already told you how to do this. You just need to put in the variable here, and then choose the sign of the middle term, and then take out the square root of your last term. Therefore, this must be x minus 5 over 2. That's coming from the square root of 25 and the square root of 4. So that must be x minus 5 over 2 squared, and then equal to the same number, 36 over 4. Now, next step is to solve the equation by extracting square root. So what we usually do in using extracting square root, we just need to put down or bring down this what is inside the parenthesis here, and then change this one here into plus and minus, plus and minus square root of this one here. Okay, so we're going to have now x minus 5 over 2 equal to positive and negative 36 over 4. Take note that for completing the square, medyo mahaba-habang usapan pa siya. So, solving this would mean that you still need to take out the square root of 36 over 4. So, the square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 4 is 2. So, that must be 6 over 2. Okay, this has a purpose why I did not divide them as I've told you. So, the next step is to transpose negative 5 over 2 to the other side. Okay, so this will become positive 5 over 2. And then, next step is of course to separate the plus and minus here. So, we're going to have it that way. Now, since they have the same denominators, then it will be easy for us. That's the purpose actually. That's the purpose of why I intentionally did not divide the 36 over 4 earlier. Okay, so to have a very easy way of adding them. So 5 plus 6 is 11, right? So we're going to have here 11 over 2. We cannot have a whole number for 11 over 2, so it's just a fraction. We'll retain it as it is. Okay, so 11 over 2. Now here we have 5 minus 6. That's basically negative 1. So we're going to have here negative 1 half. Okay, so is it the same thing as what we have solved using factoring? Yes, of course. Okay, so either way, you should have chosen right now which of the two would you like to choose. Okay, so again, the question is actually opinion based. It's up to you. With your own convenience, it's really up to you to choose whether it would be factoring or it would be completing the square. Now, let's have here another problem. Gregorio solved the equation 2x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. The first few parts of a solution are shown below. So, Gregorio is actually using completing the square here. So, here are the solutions. You examine that carefully. And then you answer the question, do you think Gregorio arrived at the correct solution? You need to justify your answer. Okay, so let's look at the equation of Gregorio. Okay, from here, he started with transposing constant to the other side. So you have here negative 15. So we assumed he started with that. But we know that Gregorio should have started dividing the equation by 2. But it's okay. You can switch the process, the steps 1 and 2. You can switch that. For as long as switching them would mean, let's say, transposing first, transposing constant to the other side, and then followed by dividing both sides of the equation by 8. However, after this step, after transposing, Gregorio is actually now adding the b over 2 squared. Therefore, he is now expressing this part here as a perfect square trinomial. So what do you think? Do you think Gregorio arrived at a correct solution? Alright, analyze for a while. You can pause the video and then check up on the right answer later. Okay, so class, I told you earlier that steps 1 and 2 could be switched, but it should not be skipped. So in other words, if for example nag-start ka transposing your constant to the other side, you should have followed it by dividing the equation by a. Remember that your a is not yet equal to 1, and hindi ka pwedeng mag-complete ng square, hindi ka pwedeng mag-express as perfect square trinomial kapag meron ka pang value ng a na hindi equal to 1. So, therefore, class, Yes, you're correct. Gregorio will not arrive definitely with the correct solution kasi nga hindi niya na-follow yung steps. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-divide mag-complete ng square pag yung a mo is not equal to 1. Okay? So, I hope that is clear. Okay, so now, this is your asynchronous activity which will be given as a group work. Okay, so we have here the following problems. Do you agree that any quadratic equation can be solved by completing the square? Justify your answer. So if you just watch the video from the start, so this one is very easy for you, right? Okay, next question is that what do you think is the most appropriate method of solving x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0? Explain and solve the equation using the method you choose. Alright, so some of the given examples in the first parts of this video has questions similar to this, so you can go back there and then solve or answer this problem. But this is a group activity, so you have your group mates to share ideas with. Alright? So this is what you're going to do. You have only 2 questions, right? So first is to schedule a time for your group to meet either on Messenger or on Google Meet, whichever is agreed by the group. So make sure to take note of the attendance. That's note taker's job, right? Now discuss your answers to the questions and then finalize everything and assign somebody to discuss your answers. So here, para tayong nagre-reporting lang. Okay? So, reporting ang group task na to. So, lahat ng sagot nyo sa numbers 1 and 2 shall be reported. And you should discuss your answer in recorded way. So, it should be given as a video. Alright? So, you may also assign 2 or more members to do this discussion. Let's say, lahat kayo for example, yung napagkasunduan ng group is lahat kayo dapat involved, so you can have someone who will be doing the introduction and then someone who would answer question number 1 and then someone who would discuss question number 2, or pwede din isa lang ang reporter nyo. Okay? So dapat naka-video siya. Alright? So finalize the video. You can do some editing, di ba? Magaling naman kayo dyan. Edit the video if you can. And then, upload it in your group drive. Dun sa, meron tayong group activities na folder sa drive natin, right? Dun nyo siya i-upload with the file name format 9, say aquamarine or alexandrite or amethyst, and then group number, and then group activity number 2. Okay, so if you still have questions, you can always message me on Facebook. Alright, so that will be our class. Bye-bye.